For this video, we have partnered with Woodgrain. They are celebrating 65 years of manufacturing and supplying quality wood products like millwork, lumber, doors, both exterior and interior, as well as windows and much more. I was fortunate to visit one of their distribution centers right here in Georgia, and I'll tell you a little bit more about the products that we used to finish our flooring. And then in the end of the video, I'll also share how we care for our floors, because I know a lot of you guys are wondering how to maintain them. So without further ado, let's get started. So once our floors were sealed and cured, it was time to add the finishing touch and install those baseboards to give them a clean and polished look. Now, Woodgrain has a vast selection of styles and sizes for millwork. We decided that we wanted a more modern farmhouse look, so we went with trim that was 1 by 6 by 8 foot in length, and it was squared off at the edges for a simple look. Now, this is the Finished Elegance line. It can be found at your local Home Depot. There is no painting required. Simply cut, install, and touch up. We did paint it because we were going with a specific white throughout the entire house, and that's totally up to you. Now, Finished Elegance is resistant to splitting, moisture, scratching, and even denting. And you can find even more information on it at finishedelegance.com. Now, here's the Latino engineer with some tips on how to cut your millwork.
Is to use a type of blade that is meant for finishing. So you don't have to use this specific kind that I got, but you just get like a polished finished blade. So what that is it has a lot more teeth than a regular ripping blade. The more teeth a blade has, the smoother the cut. So if you have a blade that comes with the actual saw, it's not going to have as many teeth because it's meant to just do rough cuts. So this is something I highly recommend. Make sure you get a finishing blade that has a lot more teeth, so when you do your actual cuts, they're smooth and they're not rough and they don't chip, you know, your molding. So if you see the difference here, same thing for our circular saw. So as you saw me earlier ripping the wood flooring, same thing. We used a finer blade because the blades that come with the actual tools, you know, they have less teeth and they're just meant to do rough cuts. So whenever you're doing finishing work, make sure you use a good fine blade.
And as you can see, as soon as you start adding those baseboards, your floors look so much better. And we love that we went with a thicker baseboard because it just gives it a little bit of a higher end look than just a simpler, shorter one. The boards that we used were 1 inch by 6 inch by 8 feet in length. The Latino engineer used a nail gun and finishing nails to install all of the baseboards.
So for those of you that don't know the angle of bay windows, the angle to get 2 pieces of wood so they can turn is 22.5 degrees. And the best thing that I like to do is I get a scrap piece of wood, cut it at that angle on my miter saw, and then just line it up. That way you have the outside angle and the inside angle. And in this instance, if it's off just a little bit, you just adjust it by like 1/2 degree. That way you get the angle that you want. So it's pretty easy, you know. It's 22.5, and just make sure you orient it in the direction that it turns. Outside corner, inside corner, and that's it.
And as you guys know, Nelson and I are not trained professionals by any means, so if we can definitely tackle something like this, we know that you can too. And oftentimes we do work together on projects like this. and help each other out as much as we can.
So I heard this saying that I think applies to the Latino engineer, and that is, we tried our best and we caulked the rest. So we'll just caulk all the little imperfections and it'll be like brand new.
So yes, because walls aren't perfect and neither are floors, sometimes you will get little gaps like this, but don't fret because caulk will cover this up.
So the last thing to finish the baseboards is your toe mold or toe kick. And
I think it's shoe molding.
Shoe mold.
I don't know. I think we've heard it called so many things.
So that basically fills in the gap between the baseboard and the floor. Since our floor obviously is not 100% square, but it's okay. Once you put that in, this stuff is pretty flexible. So, you know, you pretty much put it on, put pressure, and then nail it in, and then boom, you're done.
Now, the Latino engineer does like to make all of his cuts first and dry fit them up against the wall where they go, and then after he's done cutting all of them, he'll go back and nail them in as you see here. Once everything was installed, we did go back with some of the Finished Elegance caulk to seal up all of those joints and gaps. This will definitely make everything look like a professional did it, I promise. So the Latino engineer and I usually tag team when we do this. He adds the caulk with the caulk gun and I come in and smooth it out. Now I do like to use a glove for this because it can get a little messy. Now once you're done with this, all you have to do is use a touch-up kit, but in our instance, we went ahead and painted it. So the first thing I did was roll out some painter's tape and make sure to cover those brand new plywood floors. Now for this, I am using the same paint that I like to use for my cabinets. It's that emerald trim urethane enamel in semi-gloss in my favorite extra white. Here we tag team again, and I basically would go in, do all of the borders on the top and the bottom, and the Latino engineer would come in from behind and he would use a 4-inch roller to smooth out the tall part of the trim and get any brush strokes off that could have been there. Also, while I was painting the baseboards, I made sure to do all of the trim around the doors. That way everything matched nicely since it was looking a little dingy. And then once everything was painted, it was time to remove the painter's tape. Oh my goodness, I am so excited and so happy with how these floors turned out and how the baseboards took them to a whole different level. I'd love to know what you guys think of how these floors turned out. We are so excited that this part is complete because we have many more projects to share with you guys and even more work that we'll be doing with Woodgrain. Now the floors have been installed for a few months now and we have been living with them just fine, and I'm sure you're wondering how I clean them. So here's that information for all of you. Now, while we sealed everything properly, this is plywood and it was our first time doing this. So I wanted to make sure that there was a mop that I could use on this floor that would not wet it too much. And I found the perfect one. It's called the Mopsy Pro 2. It's a small bucket with 2 small chambers, one where you actually insert it to get the soap and water, and the second chamber where you rinse it out. I wring it about 3 times to get the excess moisture off, and then I just use it on the floors like a normal mop. And I like it because it gets really close to those baseboards and gets every single nook and crevice. And then I run it along the wood grain, and it dries so fast because there's not a ton of moisture on the mop head. And all I use is some water and a little bit of Murphy's oil. And the Murphy's oil does not make it super slick or super shiny. You guys know I chose a satin finish for my floors because I like it a little bit more matte than shiny. And thus far, everything has been great on these floors. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you so much, Woodgrain, for partnering with us. And don't forget, we will be doing a live to answer all of those questions that remain for these floors. So stay tuned for that as well. This is your Latina Next Door, and I will see you guys in the next video. Until then, adios.